Hi guys, and welcome back to a new video. In today's video, I will be talking about something that many of you are doing every day, and that when not done properly can end up in making you and a lot of people in the process lose some gold. So what I'm going to talk about in today's video is undercutting items on the auction house. I'm sure that all of you who have tried to sell things on the auction house know that when sometimes you have a lot of competition, it's very difficult to actually get the final sell. And so what you have to do is to undercut the other person in order to then be the one who has a chance to finally sell the item. So of course, most people will simply try to undercut by maybe 1 gold or even less. But sometimes some people will think that just by undercutting by a huge amount of gold, they will be able to sell these different items faster. But what I want to talk about in today's video is the fact that this is a misconception, and in many cases it won't work, and you will just end up having to fight with the same level of competition to sell the same item for a way lower value. So what I want to do in today's video is go through some bad examples and good examples of when you should undercut by a huge amount of gold, and also really try again to highlight why in many cases it will be counterproductive not only for you but also for other players to really try and break the market in order to sell your items faster. So let's start with a few bad examples. For instance here, let's take the example of this item right here. As I mentioned in a video recently, these are some of the techniques that you can find on the auction house for maybe 50 to 100 gold. Again, because probably a lot of people have lost patience and the value of the item really dropped considerably. So what I did is really simple. I bought the entire stock and then I started to resell them for 30k gold each. And as you can see, I was able to sell them for a short period of time, but then as soon as people saw that they had to wait a little bit in order to sell the item, they started to undercut by not just a few thousands, but by probably like around 70% of the value of the item. And you could ask, so is it something that worked? Were these people able to sell these different items faster? Well, as you can see, the answer is no. As for instance, I was able to buy these items for only 50 gold. I don't really care if I'm just selling them for 5k gold. So I will always follow the competition. And as you can see right now, they are now selling for only 700 gold. So in not even a week, unfortunately, this item lost 90% of the value. And this is probably due to a few people who thought that by undercutting by a huge amount of gold, they would be able to sell these items faster. And now let's just have a look and see if like that, people have stopped selling these items for only 700 gold. And as you can see, it is not the case at all. Everyone followed the prices and everyone is still trying to sell this item for 700 gold. So I can bet you everything you want that the person who initiated this big undercut is probably still here trying to sell their item. And unfortunately, this person will still have to wait for the prices to drop considerably and for some people to just buy out the entire market and visit the price, or for people to really lose patience and just then give up, and then you will maybe be able to sell the item. So this is a good example of when unfortunately undercutting by a huge amount of gold is not going to help you sell anything faster, and in the end you're just going to end up having to fight the same competition for a lower value. Another good example is the plans for the Black Dragon Touch Hammer. As you can see, these were selling for 95,000 gold each, and then someone decided to undercut and put the new value at 65,000 gold. So undercutting by 1/3 of the initial value. And as you can see, it didn't prevent anyone else to actually sell the item, because again, people are just gonna sell the item. And so unfortunately, this person probably didn't get any sales so far, and the value just dropped considerably. And as you can see really with this item, for instance, if you are a little bit patient, you can really sell it for a huge amount of gold. Again, sometimes you will have to fight a little bit, but in many cases, if you are trying to drop the prices, people will still follow you and you will just end up again being only able to sell it for maybe 1/3 of the initial price that you could have hoped for. And one thing that is always important to keep in mind is that, of course, if you don't want to spend too much time on the auction house and you don't want to have to undercut the entire day, it's especially annoying when you have someone who is there all day long and who is undercutting after undercuts after undercuts. what you can do is simply decide to post the item for a lower price in the bid price. So let's say, for instance, here you want to follow the value. What you do is you only put then a bid price maybe by 10 or 15%. And then what I usually do is I put on short so people know that they won't have to wait too long in order to get the item when they use the bid price. And like that, you don't have to spend your entire day undercut and you can just leave your item. And in many cases, people will use the bid price in order to get the item for a lower price. So like that, the market remains the same and you are still able to get a sell even if it's for a little bit less gold, but you don't have to undercut the entire day in order to get one sell. So here, of course, it's very important to insist on the fact that yes, indeed, in some cases, you will end up selling your item faster because if you are really breaking the market and selling it at a ridiculous amount of gold, people will end up not following you. And also, in many cases, people will simply buy your items in order to then repost them for a higher price. So if your strategy is really just getting maybe 2,000 gold from an item you could sell for 100,000 gold, then sure, you can do that. But again, I just feel like this is counterproductive for you and also for the rest of the people trying to sell the item. Because this is always a bluff. And remember that unfortunately, in some cases, some people will just follow you. And then in many situations, the market will just crash. And then most people who were trying to make some gold with these different items will also suffer from your action. Now let's talk about a few situations where you might want to actually consider undercutting the items on the auction house by a huge amount of gold. And this is again something I would only recommend you to do when it is really necessary and when you feel like you don't really have another choice. So the first situation is, for instance, when you're trying to sell an item and that someone else is trying to sell it for a value that is completely ridiculous. And by that, I really mean something that is maybe 5 million gold for something that normally sells for 50,000 gold. In these type of scenarios, you know that there is a really low percent of chance that someone will actually buy the item for the value that is posted on the auction house. And so if you want to actually get a sell, and if you want to avoid letting other people get these different items and then arriving on the market as well, and then having just more competition, you might want to consider lowering the price a little bit, or in some cases, a lot, because again, unfortunately, in some cases, some items will just never sell from the auction house because the value is too high and it is very unlikely that anyone would ever spend the gold in order for you to get a sell. Again, keep in mind, sometimes you will always find a crazy person who doesn't know the value and who has a lot of gold and who will be willing to maybe purchase it for a ridiculous amount of gold, but this is very rare. And also again, you always then open up the possibility for other people to arrive on the market and then to have more competition and to have to fight for a lower price than what you could have sold when you are only one or two selling this item. And of course, what you can always decide to do is, as I mentioned before, just follow the price that is currently on the auction house and then just add a bid price that is cheaper than what is currently offered. And like that, in many cases, you might still end up getting some people who will try and buy the item even without having to actually reset the market or change the value that is currently on the market. Another thing that I personally sometimes do and that I know some people might also do, and which will require you to break a little bit the prices, is when, for instance, you have one item that you really want to sell or a market you know that is really good at the moment and you want to kind of break the prices so then people follow you and you can then buy out the entire stock and reset for a higher price. Something that is especially good for items that are extremely difficult to get, or for items that have been removed from the games, or just items that you know people won't be able to restock very easily. For instance, almost never do that with crafted items because unfortunately people will always be able to craft them back, and so in many cases you will just end up getting a lot of items you will have to sell and still the same level of competition. But with specific items, you can really try and do that. And basically by putting your item at a very low price, you will invite people to join you. And then as soon as everyone is joining you, you can then cancel your auctions, buy out the entire stock, and then reset the value and try to sell these items for a way better price. This is something, as you can see here, for instance, that I did with all these different items. I decided to really break the prices, and like that I was able to then buy out the entire stock, and all these items have been removed from the game, so I know that I'm not going to have a lot of competition by doing so. And so here, this is really something that I did internationally. And again, it was a bluff because in many cases, as you can see here, for instance, some people decided to buy these different items and I ended up losing some gold in the process. But in some scenarios, you might end up being able to then buy out the entire stock and making a lot of profit by doing this trade. So really, this is the main point I wanted to make in this video, is that even in some cases you might want to make these big moves and undercut the value by a lot. In most cases you will just end up losing a lot of gold and also probably making a lot of people lose a lot of gold in the process. So what I would always suggest you to do is really try to find other opportunities and other solutions, such as for instance adding bid prices or maybe using trade chat instead. But lowering the price just because you are not happy with the competition and because you think you will be able to sell the items faster is really not a smart move, and unfortunately not something I would encourage you to do. So that's it for today's video. I will be back very soon with more guides and more videos, and in the meantime I wish you all a great start of the weekend. Bye!